All right, everybody, welcome back to the number one television program in the history of the entire universe. I am Brian Lee Durfee, author of The Forgetting Moon, The Blackest Heart, and The Lonesome Crown, all three books published by Simon & Schuster's Saga Press. Today we're going to be doing a book discussion about Stephen King's novel Dreamcatcher. If you followed my channel for any length of time, you know that I have read and reviewed every single Stephen King novel in order of publication on this channel. And, but those were spoiler-free book reviews. Now we're going to do a series, now we're starting to do a series of spoiler-filled book discussions, a little bit longer format. And I'm not going to do them in order of publication. I'm just going to do them randomly. Whatever Stephen King book I feel like reading at the moment and discussing, that's the one we're going to do. It's Dreamcatcher. Dreamcatcher, just out of the random blue, that's the one I felt like rereading and doing a discussion on. So let's get to it. Came out in 2001. This is the first book that Stephen King wrote after his big car accident. This is his post-accident novel. And I consider he's kind of got two different careers. He's kind of got the pre-car accident career and then the post-car accident career. And I think that there's a slight difference between the sort of the writing style, tone, and everything else of books. Of course, this was in 2001 when this came out, but I think the accident was around in 98 or 99. So there was a period of a couple of years where he didn't write, where he was recovering from that car accident. And if you don't remember, he was walking along the roads in Maine doing his morning walk, and he got hit by a truck. That's the accident he was in. And I remember being a Stephen King fan back then, my favorite author, and I heard in the news that he had been hit and he might die. I was like crushed. I was devastated. I was like, oh my gosh, this is awful. So good thing that he recovered and he's doing well now, and he's written some 20-odd books since. So, this book, Dreamcatcher, he admits himself. I like the book quite a lot, but I have read interviews where he said that he kind of doesn't. It's like one of his least favorites, but I think it's good. I think it's it's kind of like a horror novel, but also mixed with a straight first contact alien invasion science fiction book. It's really more science fiction than horror, but it is a combination of both. It reminded me a lot of the Tommyknockers, which was kind of a sci-fi horror mashup that he had done earlier in his career. But this one seems to be a little more, I can't remember, it's maybe a little more subtle, but then over to the top in a lot of ways too. So it opens up with kind of like Carrie opened up, with various news reports. Carrie kind of opened up. Carrie was kind of structured in the way where a lot of the story was told from news reports and things like that. This kind of does the same at the beginning, but then it abandons that really quick. But we open up with various news reports of alien and UFO sightings going all the way back to World War II. And then we slowly are introduced to our four main characters and their friends. They grew up together. They had adventures as youngsters together. They grew up in Derry, Maine. Okay, so Derry, Maine is one of the Castle Rock and Derry. That's where most of Stephen King's novels take place. So this fits into the Stephen King universe and the multiverse of Stephen King, where a lot of different characters and different references to other books are placed and scattered throughout this book, which is fun. Not only that, but I'll get to it in a little bit, but this book actually has some predictions for some other Stephen King books that came some 20 years later, and we're going to mention that a little bit. So the first character we meet is the Beeve. He's just known as the Beeve, and it's set in 1998 when the Beeve is a young adult, a young married guy, but he's not happily married. He hangs out in the bars to kill time. And then we jump to our second character, Pete, And this little prologue takes place in 1993. We find out that Pete is a car salesman. He's trying to pick up ladies a lot. He fails. That's kind of his little backstory. And then the third character is Henry, and that prologue takes place in 1998. He's a therapist. There's a very funny scene where he has to tell, well, he kind of gets a little fed up with one of his therapy clients, who's a fat guy, 5'7", 420 pounds. And there's a funny scene where, as a therapist, Pete or Henry just lays the truth out in a brutal fashion that, hey, you're fat and you're gonna die. But he says it in a lot funnier way and more rude and crude. The number 4 character that we meet is Jonesy, and we meet him in the year 2001. He's a teacher at a college, and he seems to be the most put together of the 3 at the time we're in those prologues. And then we also kind of get to know them a little bit as kids in 1978 in their younger years. And we also, throughout the book, this book has a lot of flashbacks. It's kind of like It. It really reminded me of It in the structure of, we get the story of them as adults, these guys as adults, and then we get also a story of them flashing back to 1978 as young kids growing up in a group of young people that they hang out with, one of which is Duddit's sort of a special needs child. And we'll get into that a little bit, the little flashbacks back to when they were children. But that's how they bonded. They bonded as children. These four men, they bonded as children in 1970s and over some events that happened that we do get to read about in this book, in the flashbacks. And if you remember It had a lot of those flashbacks too. Well, God, half the book was the flashbacks to the children. And that's why It was such a great, great story, is because we got the young version of the characters and then the old version of the characters. That's exactly what we're getting here. Also set in Derry, Maine, which is where It was set. So these guys, they have now that they're adults, they have an annual hunt. They go deer hunting together annually. That's when they get together annually. And then right at the beginning of the novel, after our prologues, we get to see them traveling towards their hunt and sort of starting their hunt in the Maine woods. And it's really quaint to me. Hunting in the lower 48, deer hunting in the lower 48 is really quaint, because I grew up hunting moose and grizzly bears and caribou and stuff up in Alaska with my father, where it's a lot rougher. It's like actual hunting. I mean, you're really out in the wilderness hunting. In fact, we were so far out in the wilderness hunting in Alaska that we would hunt moose on an army tank. I'm not making this up. We would literally, my dad bought an army tank to go moose hunting. That's how fucking rough the Alaska wilderness is. If you don't believe me, just type in to YouTube search bar, because I have a video from when I was a kid of us moose hunting on an army tank. Just type into YouTube Durfee, my last name, Durfee, moose hunting army tank, into YouTube search bar. That video will show up. It's pretty cool, at least I think. But it makes me realize that hunting in other states ain't the same as Alaska. In fact, it's kind of cute. The way these guys go out and hunt in Maine is cute. They climb in a tree in a deer stand. That's like lame hunting. In my opinion, that's lame hunting. But anyway. And a lot of stuff in the book happens in the deer stand. In fact, I think it's Jonesy or Beeve that ends up in this deer stand the most. Anyway, soon, during the hunt, we find out that Jonesy, he's the one in the deer stand. He reminisces about when he was hit by a car. And I think that Jonesy character is kind of representative of Stephen King's character. Because Stephen King's character, what the fuck am I talking about? Jonesy, I think, is a representation of Stephen King himself, because Jonesy has a backstory where he was hit by a car and severely injured and has major pain and major problems. That's one of the reasons he just wants to stay in the deer stand all the time rather than kind of hike around and hunt a little bit like the other guys do. Like I said, this book was written right after Stephen King was hit by a car, and now we've got Jonesy who's been hit by a car. And so there's a lot of themes about pain and anguish and overcoming pain, physical pain, with medications and things that this character is going through that I think Stephen King probably put in the book because he was going through the similar things. So anyway, a strange man walks into camp. In fact, a strange man acting strangely wanders under the deer stand and walks into camp, and Jonesy follows him. Jonesy and the Beeve are at the camp at this time, and they follow this guy, and he's acting weird, and they invite him into the camp because they think he's lost and mentally deranged, and they want to help him. And this is kind of the scenes where we get to kind of know Jonesy and Beeve and their relationship, and kind of there's these boys as they grew up, these four boys. They came up with a lot of swear word combinations that get used a lot in the book, and they're funny. Nobody can write little swear word diatribes the way Stephen King does. I mean, the stuff they say to each other is just like Jesus Christ bananas, doodly fuck me Freddy. I mean, all of these things are placed, and there's more that are just funnier than that I mentioned. They're just placed in the greatest spots. And when this stranger wanders into camp in the cabin, there's something off with this guy. And this is where there's a lot of fart jokes and poop jokes. And if you've read this book, you know what I'm talking about. This is the most fart and poop-centric novel and bumhole exploration novel. Hey, but we're talking about alien invasion here, folks. The old cliche, the aliens kidnap people and probe their bungholes. Evident in this book, 100%. There's a lot of fart jokes, a lot of poop jokes. And that's interesting because you can get away with that. Stephen King gets away with that really crass, crude, childhood, junior high, 13-year-old boy humor a lot. Like, you can't write a serious murder mystery, or, God, you can't even write much of anything and put these kind of grotesque jokes and funny things in them without people just rolling their eyes. But Stephen King gets away with it, and I think the horror genre in general gets away with it because it's just expected. I think Stephen King has set the precedent for a lot of goofiness and a lot of crude humor to happen in his horror novels, whereas you couldn't get away with it necessarily in like a novel like Dune or Lord of the Rings, or even like the Harry Bosch, Michael Connelly, L.A. police procedural books. It would just seem out of place. But in a King novel, it slides right in. And I think that's because in the book Carrie, he introduced his writing style early on, and now it's just, I wouldn't even put, well, I guess I have to back up because I have put a few poo-poo jokes in some of my books. But anyway, I digress. What's happening with the stranger in the cabin is funny because this guy, he's ill, he's sick. There's a lot of weird sightings going on in the woods, like a lot of very close encounters of the third kind type of. There's things are like lights in the sky, lights in the trees. Did I just see E.T. walking through the woods kind of a thing going on? And Pete and Henry, of course, are not in the cabin. They are out in their truck, and they happen to just crash their truck in a random spot. And they also are seeing like weird things in the woods. What's going on? It's getting a little bit creepy. They actually see lights in the sky. They run into a strange lady that they can't figure out. And while all of this is going on, there's like this thing in each one of their minds where they can almost kind of telepathy. They kind of dream. When they dream, they sort of see each other, and so they kind of are knowing what is happening to each other at the same time. It's like this weird telepathy, supernatural thing going on between them. And then this all stems back, of course, from their childhood in 1978, when they happened to, all four of them happened to help this special needs kid who is getting bullied, and this kid's name is Duddits. And they helped this special needs kid who was being bullied, and they sort of bonded over that. But at the same time they bonded over that, they were all kind of bestowed upon them this magical sort of supernatural power where they can see into each other's minds and read each other's dreams and kind of know what's happening with each other when they're not around each other. And I'll just read the back of the paperback copy because it gives a good description that... So once upon a time, in the haunted city of Derry, 4 boys stood together and did a brave thing. It was something that changed them in ways they could never begin to understand. 25 years after saving a Down syndrome kid from bullies, Beeth, Henry, Pete, and Jonesy, now men with separate lives and separate problems, reunite in the woods of Maine for their annual hunting trip. But when a stranger stumbles into their camp, disoriented and mumbling something about lights in the sky, chaos erupts. Soon the four friends are plunged into a horrifying struggle with a creature from another world where their only chance of survival is locked in their shared past and in the Dreamcatcher. So that's kind of doesn't even describe even a third of what's going on in the story, to be honest with you. But it's a good setup for what happens. So the stranger in the camp, when I talked about things, aliens, the whole cliche of aliens kidnap the rednecks and take them into their spaceships and probe their bungholes, and that's what's happening. I mean, this is like, it goes from, this alien invasion story goes from literally, did I just see twinkling lights in the sky? What's that? Oh my God, did I just see a gray man running through the woods? Oh my God, there's aliens exploding out of my asshole. Literally, that's how it escalates. I mean, it escalates. It goes slowly, subtly, slowly. God, I should just edit a lot of this stuff out. Go slowly, subtle, lights in the sky, gray men in the woods, aliens exploding out of your asshole all of a sudden. It's funny stuff. It's great humor. It is horrifying, and nobody can write a scene where fungusy aliens are exploding out of people's buttholes quite like Stephen King. Anyway, what happens is, we'll get now, this is a spoiler talk, so just keep in mind, one of our guys, Jonesy, becomes infected with this alien. And about 2/3, I can't remember when, about 1/3 through the book, we switch characters. We kind of leave the four hunters and we join this crew of military guys who are out hunting the aliens. They're military guys, like Area 51 type guys that know that there's aliens and they're out searching for them. We get Captain Kurtz. He's an insane army guy. He's kind of like the antagonist to whatever protagonists might be involved in this story. But there's Owen, there's Pearlie, who's also his short for Pearl Mutter. They're military men fighting the Gray Boys, is what they call them. These aliens, it's kind of like the movie Aliens, where they infect your body. Remember the movie Aliens with Sigourney Weaver as Ripley? In fact, there's a lot of references to the character Ripley in this book from the aliens. How the alien would put itself in someone's body and then explode out. Well, in Aliens, it exploded out their chest. And in this book, they explode out their butthole. But anyway, but they can turn people into zombies, this fungus will turn people into alien mind-reading zombies, which happens to one of our characters, Jonesy. And once it happens to Jonesy, of course, this is where we go from horror novel to straight science fiction alien invasion story. There's where Jonesy is kind of known as this, he's infected by the spores and turns into Mr. Gray, is what they call him. And he's got his friends try to save him, and there's one line that I wanted to mention that comes about 2/3 of the way through the book, which really startled me, and that was the line where Stephen King says, one of the characters says, well, there's no time travel, we can't go back in time and kill Lee Harvey Oswald. There's a character says that in this book, which is in 2001. And then, of course, we know Stephen King actually did write a story about that very topic of somebody did go back in time to try to stop Lee Harvey Oswald from killing Kennedy. 11/22/63 in here. Some other cool things as we get references to Pennywise. We get messages from the kids that were in the novel It. We get messages from them to these characters. There's a lot of stuff in the Stephen King multiverse that's kind of packed into this really cleverly, and I really enjoyed that. You not all of the, and I'm not gonna, not all of the characters make it out of this alive. I mean, the Beeve dies. Beeve dies. You know, fairly early too in the story. I mean, and then Jonesy is of course infected with the spores, and he becomes sort of a bad man slash good man. I mean, you can't. I mean, he knows. They kind of know what's going on. They're trying to save him. There's just it ends up being going from horror, deer hunt. It's kind of like I said, it to horror. It's not as good as it, of course. I mean, the whole children in 1978, and then all of their adventures with Duddits. And I haven't really talked much about Duddits and his part in the story, but it all goes back to the telepathy. You know, it's a convoluted plot involving Duddits helping Henry exorcise Mr. Gray out of Jonesy. That's kind of the way it ends, where Duddits comes back around, and he comes back around and helps his friends save the other friend. And that's kind of the whole book, really, in a nutshell. There's a lot of, I think that the first third of the book is the best third, when we're getting to know the characters, when we're getting to know, Beef, Pete, Henry, and Jonesy, their backstory, when they were kids in 1978, helping their friend, the mentally challenged kid, and all of that stuff is straight out of it. It is just really good. I loved that part of it. And then the novel is still good up until the very end. It's still good, but I think I was a little bit more, not bored isn't the right word. I was a little less interested in the army guys and their conversations with each other. I was a little less interested with that. Their characters didn't seem to be quite as dynamic or interesting as the four original ones, plus Duddits. And even the crazy guy that wandered into the camp and had aliens squirting out his ass. That guy was even interesting, you know. I mean, how could it not be? How could it not be? And there's a lot of poop and fart jokes, too, which those kind of tapered off towards the end. I mean, it does kind of devolve into just a sort of an alien chase kind of a thing, which is fine. You know, the movie, I remember I watched the movie when the movie first came out in like 2003. I've only seen it once, but if I remember correctly, the movie veers way far off from the book, and the movie just goes straight into just the four hunters just battling it out against crazy, stupid-looking CGI aliens, which is not really the way it plays out in the book at all. I like the book. It's I think I like it more than Stephen King himself liked it. I mean, he mentions it as several times as being one of his least favorite he's done. But I think it's got a lot going for it, especially at the beginning. And it's a decent throughout, but it's not it. I mean, when I ranked all 90 Stephen King novels. I can't remember where this one ranked in the ranking, but I think it was about in the middle of the pack. It wasn't high, it wasn't low, it was just aight, you know. And I love all Stephen King books, so when I say a Stephen King book is aight, it just means that there's about 24 that are just fucking way better. There's a way so brilliant that it just makes this one pale in comparison. And this horror novel, makes most other horror novels written by other people pale in comparison. That's how much I love Stephen King. Anyway, that's my spoiler-filled discussion of Dreamcatcher. Tell me what you guys think in the comments. If you disagree, agree. So I know it's not many people's favorite King, but nor is it mine. But I don't think it's as bad as Stephen King thought it was. Anyway, that is all I got to say about it.